Welcome to Sera, a podcast hosted by me, Sera and Lalone. Join me as I go straight to the sources of my curiosity. Each episode, I get to discover or rediscover everyday educators as we discuss their passions and their projects. Listen in on our conversation and let our words spark imagination and inspiration. All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Sera. It is a chilly Sunday morning here in Van Cleek Hill, where I'm recording the podcast, and it is an afternoon, I would say, over in Albania, where I'm talking with my next, I was going to say invité, because I got my French brain on, with my next guest. Her name is Tonya Gilchrist, and I have been waiting so long to speak with her, being in different continents, being on different time zones. It's not always easy, but we are perseverant. We are here. Tonya is an international literacy consultant. She has a ton of cool things to talk to us about today. I'm really excited to just chat with her. And Tonya has been on a bunch of podcasts, so she's a pro at this. So without further ado, I will let Tonya introduce herself.
Hi, thanks, Sera. And yeah, it's always so neat to think about where other people are in the world when we're talking, and that it's morning there, it's late afternoon here in Albania, and I'm just so excited that we're getting to do this. So for the listeners out there, as Sera said, I'm an international literacy consultant with Aaron Kent Consulting, and this is actually the first academic year where I've been doing that full time. So I most recently was still in the classroom teaching middle school language and literature, as well as serving as a literacy coach. So I taught about 2 sections of Lang and Lit, and then I also worked as a coach, and that was in Tokyo, Japan, at Tokyo International School. Before that, I was in Thailand, and before that, I started my career in education in the U.S., working in the state of Virginia, which is where I was born and raised, and then also I taught for a bit in Texas, which is where my husband is from. So but we've been international now for many years, and as my work as a coach grew, I also got the opportunity to start working at different schools and helping their teachers and their teams with professional learning all around literacy. And that work grew so much that I ended up partnering with Aaron Kent, who started her own consulting firm, and now we have a whole team of just wonderful, wonderful educators who are really passionate about literacy and inquiry, and really all things learning. And so now I get the wonderful blessing of going to schools all around the world and helping them just do what's best for kids, especially in the area of reading and writing, but also just kind of all over, whatever their school needs, we see what we can do to help. So this year has been a new schedule for me, also a new place to live. We moved from Japan to Albania, so it's been a lot of new starts and really exciting work. And I'm glad that we could make this happen. I've been traveling so much. I just had a stretch of multiple school visits. So I was in Qatar and then Beijing and then Seoul, and now I'm home. So I knew during this week at home, I wanted to be like, let's make the podcast happen before I have to take another trip. So yeah, so that's a little bit about me. And when I go to schools, one big thing that I love is that at almost every trip, we make sure to do what's called lab sites, which is going in the classroom and actually working with the kids. So I'm definitely still a teacher as well, and I need that kid time. It's really important to me. So whatever we're working on at a school, we can talk theory all day, but it's so important to actually put it into practice and to see it with our kids at our school, because every context is different. So that's something about my work that I love, is we always go into the classrooms.
And that's important, right? Because I think it just brings you back to that why you're there. And, I think it's absolutely incredible. so two things. First, that you have a team of like passionate educators that work together for the betterment of students, essentially. I think that's everyone's dream as an educator, is to work with like a team that has like student success at heart. And that's not every, like, obviously the reality for every educator in every school around the world. So I just am like so happy when I hear people in teams that like function properly and that have like good dynamics, and where, you know, educators support each other, because I'm like a really big team player. So, and I'm sure for you guys, as you travel, right, like you guys basically must become like family.
Yeah, yes. And it's, what you said is so true. Like, I feel so blessed to be, working with others who really just have the same, like, sort of, for lack of a better word, mission, you know, of
Right.
what they believe in and what they want. And that,
Yes.
and we're all so passionate about it. And so we're always, sometimes we're on the same trips together. So we might be doing a regional conference or something like that, and it'll be a whole group of us together. And I mean, I learn so much from and with them, but also it's just so much fun to be together with people who are all, you know, gathered around the same big driving force in their life.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of times we're on different trips.
Really?
So
Oh,
what's fun though is that we'll be on Facebook Messenger, and you know how you can send little like 1 minute audio clips on Facebook Messenger. So we'll have these group chats where we're always like debriefing our days with each other and asking like, oh, you know, I've been thinking about this. Does anyone else have some ideas around this? And it could be about anything, you know, like classroom libraries or something. And then we're all sharing different ideas and resources. So even when we're apart, like I could be in Brazil and my colleague is in Singapore, but and someone else is in, you know, China or what have you, but we're all talking on Facebook and sharing ideas. And it's just so wonderful to be a part of a community like that.
yeah.
And what you said too about like supporting one another and lifting each other up, I think too often there's this focus on this like competitive nature. And so it's so nice to really be a
Yeah.
part of a team. Like we're all here to do what's best for kids, and we're stronger together, you know? So let's work together and lift each other up, instead of it being like, well, no, I feel like a lot of times, especially in the work of consulting or but for teachers in the classroom too, you see it, this kind of idea of like, well, no, this is like my, like, I don't know, my good idea, so like I'm going to hold
Mm-hmm.
on to it and just I use it, instead of it being like, if we've, you know, developed something great, then let's share it so that more kids can benefit, you know. So I love that our whole team is just so truly collaborative, that it really is a team in all sense of the word.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to go back to that communication piece, because I almost find it like mind blowing that you guys can be literally dispersed all around the world, and you probably have better communication between each other than like some people do with colleagues in their own school. Like, it has nothing to do with being in the same building or in the same school board, or, you know, in the same, like, whatever it may be, close or far away. What I think is really cool is that you guys, you really truly seem to like collaborate, and that communication is like key to a whole bunch of other aspects to your team. So I just find it like, um, I find it really, I want to pick the proper word for this, because it's not insightful, but like strong of you guys. Like, I feel as though just hearing the way you guys communicate, like through Messenger and keeping each other up to date and debriefing, like sometimes I don't even take the time to do that with my own colleagues who are right beside me in my classroom, kind of thing. Right. So yeah, sorry, rant over.
Yeah, but I think no, that's a beautiful point. And I think it goes back to, you know, the importance of reflection that I think is
Mm,
lost in our world, especially these days with so many distractions. I feel like, you know, as a teacher in the classroom, you know, we often talk about the importance of reflection with kids, and like, as an inquiry-based educator, reflection is a big part of inquiry, because once you reflect, then it leads to more thinking and more questions and more ways of acting and doing. But yet so often it's the one thing that often gets cut short or gets like the shaft when things get hectic or busy, when really it's so powerful. And so when you were talking, it just made me think of that not just in that aspect of as a team, but just in life, so often we kind of nix the reflection piece, when really that's one of the most important things we could do, is take a few minutes to debrief, whether it's, even if it's just with yourself. For some teachers out there, they unfortunately either don't have a colleague, they're like a single person team, or they maybe don't have the most supportive colleagues in the situation they're in. But even just like taking a few minutes to, talk to yourself. I talk to myself all the time, or write it out in a journal, or whatever. But like, even if it's with yourself, just asking some reflective questions or thinking through in your mind, what do you want to do tomorrow with your kids based on what happened today? Like being responsive to them, rather than just a mindless march through, some preset plan. Like instead, like what actually happened today in the room, and what does that mean for what's going to happen tomorrow, is so powerful, but so often can get lost in the mix. So so I'm very fortunate to have colleagues who are excited to hear me like talk out in 17 little 1-minute Facebook messages, everything that happened that day, so it's fun. It's a lot of fun.
It's absolutely incredible. And like, I think one of the only questions that I really had written down for this podcast was like, what is it like essentially, traveling the world and like living out your passion? But I think you've already kind of answered it. Like it's being able to go and reach like those students, like you were saying, like being able to actually go into classrooms and meeting like little human beings of a whole bunch of different cultures that speak a whole bunch of different languages, and just being able to like bring something to them or to their teachers. And like, I can only imagine, because you said, that you're home right now, and like originally you're from the United States, but like having a whole bunch of different second homes, I would say, like, do you find that easy? Do you find that hard? Was that something that you needed to like adapt to? Is it just something you're like, it comes with the job and it's worth it? How do you live that?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a mix of emotions for sure, and a mix of experiences. So for one thing, I'm just every day so incredibly grateful. I mean, it's incredible to be with, as you were just saying, kids and teachers and people all over the world, and to meet so many different people with different perspectives, and to be in so many different schools, even just seeing the different schools and how different campuses, I mean, both physically, how they look, because some schools will be very innovative in their ideas and how they make use of different things that they have. And then also just how they are in their spirit and culture. It's just so wonderful to see. And then you're sort of able, you have this great blessing of being able to collect all these different ideas around the world and bring them together to form new ideas that you can then share with the schools that you go to. So it's
your toolbox, must be super full. I can just imagine.
To be like, well, here's what, and to be able to talk with the school. I could be in Seoul and be like, they might be having a certain challenge there, and being able to be like, well, yeah, I was just at a school in Cairo and here's what they were doing with this. How might that look here? And it's always going to look different because every school is different, but then you can start to kind of like grow these amalgamations of ideas. And it's just really cool to be a part of, for lack of a better term. It's just really cool, and exciting. And, we talk a lot about lifelong learning, but really living it, like knowing that the more I do this work, the more I see that there's not, there's not one way. There's not one way. And so it's never going to a school and being like, well, here's what you have to do because this is like just the best thing and this is what you need to do. No, it's really about, well, what does research tell us about what readers and writers and learners need, and what might that look like in your context, and and that it is going to look different everywhere. So that aspect of it, like, I just love how fulfilling the work is, and how much it's helping me grow and learn. But it is, there's the other side of the coin where it is, exhausting too, because you
Mm-hmm.
are, you're on all day, every day, and you're traveling a lot. And so you're in different time zones and you're away from, you're living out of your suitcase. So
Yeah.
it's at times, of course, like anything else, at times it can be, you're tired, but the benefits to me so outweigh any cons that there might be. And you do start to develop a lot of schools that I go to. It's definitely not a like one and done thing. It's I'm really there to support you. So I'll go maybe in the fall and then go back in the spring. And then perhaps the next year go back again. So you're revisiting and really building these relationships with people that become just dear friends, so you do feel like you have these different homes all around the world, as you were saying. So that's a really beautiful aspect. And just getting the chance to see different cultures. Although I have to say, it is different when you're there working. So sometimes certain trips I'll go on will be, if it's exceptionally busy, it can be like I've technically been to a city, but I don't feel like I've actually been
Yeah.
there. Like I can say, yeah, I was there, but like I saw the school and the hotel, like that was it. And maybe one
Mm-hmm.
restaurant, so just because of the nature of the trip, and, you are there to work and you're wanting to do your best work. So it's certainly not, it's way different than being there on holiday or something where you have time to tour and explore and do all those things. But it is nice. You at least get a taste of things to be like, oh, I would really like to come back here, perhaps on a holiday with my
Mm-hmm.
husband or something. So,
Yeah.
yeah, so that's, I guess overall, just to say it's definitely a mix of emotions, and it takes some adjustment, but I do feel like even in just this first semester, which was wonderful, it was way busier than we ever anticipated, just because the work has been growing so much, which is great. I mean, that's a great
Mm-hmm.
thing to have happen. But suddenly it was like, whoa, I thought it was going to be on like 1 or 2 trips a month, and now it's like 3 or 4. It's like double that, and you're gone. You're home for like 2 days and then gone again. So it's a whirlwind, but man, it's a beautiful whirlwind. I'm loving it for sure.
Wow. And, you're talking about lifelong learning and how you can go to a variety of different places and countries and schools and speak with different principals and teachers, and you gain all of this knowledge that you can use like throughout your further consulting. And so that learning like never stops, like there's no final destination of the learning. It's not after 13, visits that you're like, okay, well, I could basically tackle anything now. Like I've seen it all. And it just kind of put me into that reflection that you don't ever stop like gaining those tools and gaining that experience. And I think sometimes like in teaching, we feel like we give as much as we can, and that's like all that we have to give. And we don't necessarily take the time to go and seek that knowledge to like continue our learning. So it's fun that in your role you are just like continuously learning. I feel like that's like a role that I would love to take on, because I'm just like this curious little learner. I feel like I'm a very coachable and like easy learner. So anything where I can like constantly be like, you know, seeing different things and chatting with people. And I think that's why I do the podcast, right? Is just to learn. Essentially, it's like more for me than anyone
Yeah.
else. But yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah, no, totally. I could see absolutely how, exactly what you're doing with the podcast. It's that same idea of, with every conversation, you're learning things from other educators around the world, and how that's so energizing, to know there are always new perspectives out there, different perspectives, and that nothing is finished. Like, I think, how beautiful is that, that for the rest of our lives, we get to keep growing and learning. Yeah, definitely keeps you on your toes and keeps you
Yeah,
energized, which
yeah.
is great to have for what you get to do every day. It's wonderful
Hmm.
for sure.
And no matter like what context you're in, no matter what school you're in with different, students, what I think is really admirable is that at the end of the day, it's always for the students. Like, you could be in China, or you could be in Japan, or you can be in France, you could be, in Hawaii. And no matter the culture or no matter the language that they speak, you're always just working with students who are looking to learn. In your case, right? It's in like language and literacy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. So,
And yeah. And I think too, like it's, the beautiful, like, I have a blog post I wrote, I guess it's been about a year ago, that was the kids are our North Star. And I truly do believe that, like it always comes back to what's best for the kids. And that's what's been really neat in this role that I have now as a consultant is every school I go to, we might be working on different things. It's never the same at each school, and each school has their own, goals and mission and vision and what have you. But no matter where I am with the teachers as well, when you really need to come around together around something, if you bring it back to the kids, like everyone is 100% in. And that's so inspiring to see, that we might have different perspectives on the finer points of different things, but that trunk of the tree is always the kids. And you can always come back to that. And it's like this grounding that keeps everyone together. And just, going to so many different schools in different places, it's so nice to know that that's always there, both on the kid side and on the teacher side. Yeah.
Absolutely. And on your Twitter header, you have a quote, and it says, "Teaching and leading is not about being in control. It's about empowering," which means you create an environment where students can cultivate their own autonomy, agency, and self-control. And again, like I just bringing that back to like, no matter in what type of classroom you're in, like that applies around the world. And I just find it so like connecting, because like it's really, at the end of the day, like the students that get to live this no matter where they are in the world. And I just find that sense of like unity in education, and how like every teacher, every educator in the world is just like working towards this greater good. And maybe it's because like I'm a new teacher, and I'm still in that phase. Hopefully it never leaves. But just feeling like connected, that like every day teachers wake up and go to school or go to work or go to, wherever, whatever their context may be, and work towards that goal. It's just like, It's so beautiful.
It is. It really is. Yeah, that it's all about empowering these incredible humans to go out and make the world wonderful, and that they can do that it's not this big pie in the sky dream, or this lofty ideal. It's like, no, truly, in whatever capacity they want, there's so much potential there. And so making sure that we're really tapping into that potential, and that I just love the word empower. I think that verb really encapsulates a lot of what we're trying to do. And it's interesting now, when I'm going to schools, and I mentioned we go into the classrooms, we're working with the kids, and I work with grade levels from pre-K all the way to grade 12. And it doesn't matter, if I'm in a 10th grade classroom or a pre-K or a third grade, like it's still, it's still all about empowering those kids, and instilling in them a love for learning and curiosity and open-mindedness. That holds true no matter what age, and it holds true for us as adults too. So when we're coming together as a group of adults who want to learn something new together, it's still that same stance and that same spirit.
Do you think of going back to like a school and a classroom one day in the future?
I mean, I don't think so at this point in time, just because I love what I'm doing right now so much. I think it would be different if I didn't have that, what I often call kid time. Like if I didn't get to go into classrooms, like on every trip that I do, I'm still with kids all the time. If I didn't have that, it might be different, because I know I would miss that so much. But with that piece in place, I just love what I'm getting to do. And I love that I have this wonderful opportunity to make an impact not just in one school, but
Yeah.
across the world. And just to be able to say that just makes me like pinch myself again and again. So I really want to appreciate that gift and make the most of it. So for the time being, I don't see that happening. Now, one day, who knows? Because I definitely am always a teacher at heart, and I do love the thing that you have when you have your own classroom all year long is, of course, that deeper relationship piece that you get to build with a group of kids each year is really beautiful. So you never know, but for now, for the foreseeable future, I'm really enjoying my current role. Yeah.
Wow. And you're talking about, the people that you meet, and I can just imagine like your PLN. It just doesn't even make sense. Like, I live for like obviously that connection piece with other educators. But to know that you must have like thousands of educators around the world with a whole bunch of different like experience and expertise, just like at the touch of a tweet or at a tag or at like, a DM. How do you think that like how has been building your PLN helped you like in your everyday job? And two, what is it like actually meeting, those PLN members in real life?
Yeah, so it's really it's been a huge help to me. I mean, I think even before I was a consultant, as a teacher in the classroom and then as a coach, it made a tremendous difference to have people that regularly, I'm on Twitter a lot. I know you are too, and doing different Twitter chats and things, seeing all these different perspectives. And I think, I mean, of course, one big help was that you always had these people you could reach out to for new ideas and new takeaways. But bigger than that, I think just the overall spirit that having a supportive PLN provided for me, that on days when it felt really tough or really hard, or you would almost start to feel negative and down, to know that there were so many other people that were there for the kids and that believed in the same things you did, was very uplifting. So I think sometimes we can almost get blinders on if we're having a challenging situation and start to feel like, am I crazy? Am I the only one that believes in this or thinks this? And then to suddenly realize like, no, I'm not alone. I'm not just overly positive. Like, am I the only cheesy one that thinks the kids are our North Star, like, so to speak, like, because I really do believe that. And you would feel like sometimes in certain work situations, there were definitely times where you would start to feel like, that you were a little bit of an island in that type of belief that maybe, that others might see it as, quote unquote, too positive or something when you didn't feel that way. Like when you feel like, no, this is genuinely what I think, what I believe. And so to be reminded that there are many others who believe that too. And are like, don't get me wrong, make no mistake, we're all very realistic about the challenges that are out there in the education world today, and that there are a lot of systemic issues that need to be changed. Like none of us, sugarcoat that, but we still work hard to keep a very positive, uplifting mindset, and because that's how we can then make a difference, So,
Yes.
So anyway, that was very encouraging. And then now, with getting to travel so much for my job, it's becoming more and more regular where, as you said, I'm now meeting in person all of these different members of my PLN who I've been in Twitter chats with for, a couple of years. And then suddenly we're at the same school in the same place, which is just wonderful, but also unreal.
Feeling,
yeah, you have this surreal moment of like, wait a minute. And then there have been some funny things too, where there have been a few schools I visited where I didn't even realize until I was there. In fact, this just happened like a week and a half ago. I was in Seoul and I had no idea that two of the people there were people in my PLN. Like I didn't know they were at that school. One of them, I just didn't make the connection. I didn't realize. And then the other one, she had been at a different school and then she just moved there. So this was her first year at that school. So I was still thinking she was at the other school in a different country. So, when I get there and then I see them and I'm like, wait a minute. And it can be this surreal feeling of like, also when you're not sure at first and you see someone and I'm like, wait a minute, that's like you see the profile picture in your head. So you're like, you're so-and-so. And he's like, yes. And I'm like, what? I didn't know you were here at this school. And, but I knew the face right away, So, and then it's just fun to be able to, take pictures and tweet it out to other people in our PLN to be able to see like, hey, look who I got to meet up with today, when we all feel like we know each other because we've all been supporting each other and sharing resources and participating in chats together, so then
we all like find each other.
Yes, it's so true. Yeah. So it's really neat. And it's happened, and then there have been people, like I'm from the Shenandoah Valley in Virginia, and I realized through Twitter chats that several other people were also from that area, and some like teaching in the U.S. who live there. And so over the summer, I always go back to visit my sister there. And we got together for dinner and so it's not even just in the international education arena, but all over, back stateside too, meeting up with people. And it's really neat, what a fascinating world we live in with technology. And though, of course, like anything else, there are pros and cons, I think those are some of the really good pros with it, is the ability to connect with people that you would have never met otherwise.
Yeah. Wow. I'm just like scrolling through your Twitter. I think you're like the Twitter chat queen, like 100%. And it must be hard for you because like you're not probably usually in the same time zone as these Twitter chats. So like, how does that even work?
I know. Well, it's been a lot harder for me this year. Like, I've been off this week. Like I finally had a week at home. So I've been in I was able to do a few, which were really, really nice. Like it was so much fun because when I'm traveling, it's often I might be able to make one of them that I honestly just randomly realize is happening, because as you just said, I won't even be able to keep up anymore of what time zone I'm in and this and that. So then suddenly I'm like, oh, I'll be in the airport or something and see that a chat's happening and jump in and be like, yay, I made it. Whereas before, when I was based in one location, like I had regular chats and that's where I formed a lot of the relationships with people that I'm now getting the opportunity to meet and what have you, is that there'd be certain chats that regularly occurred and that like every weekend, you'd pop in for that one on a Sunday morning or whatever. So for a long time, I was able to just regularly find certain chats that really meshed with my schedule as well and make them like every week or just about every week. But now it's become a lot more hit or miss, where I just hope that I find what I can jump in on. And I definitely maximize the time that I have at home. Like I often, I do a lot of work. When I was a teacher, I was an IB teacher. And now I do a lot of work with schools that are PYP and MYP. And so one of the chats, PYP chat, is all for PYP educators, which is for listeners out there, that's the primary years program of the International Baccalaureate. And the IB, the International Baccalaureate, is all about like inquiry-based learning, which is totally something I'm all about too. So anyway, I always make sure to host or moderate that chat whenever I have like a week at home, because I know if I don't do it then, it'll be like I never get to do it. And I really do enjoy it. So little things like that I try to do, like pre-schedule when can I actually host or moderate a chat, so that I know I'll be there for that one. And then, just try it. These days, it's just trying to keep an eye out for when I might jump in.
Just never know. Everyone,
you never know.
Honored to have you, that it fell properly with your schedule and the time zone and all that fun stuff. Before like the next little part of the podcast, what I want to do is touch upon your expertise with inquiry-based learning, and also try to just dive a little deeper into inquiry-based learning, which is something that, again, like as a new teacher, I have heard lots about. I've done a couple podcasts on it, but I don't feel confident and competent enough to really truly feel like I could master it in my classroom. And I think I'm like really open to the idea, and I've tried like bits and pieces of inquiry-based learning in like different areas and like subjects that I've taught, but probably not very well. So I'm like, I'm running to you for your expertise, and I would love to even hear how inquiry-based learning could be brought into a language classroom, because I have the honor of teaching 3 language classes next semester. So I have 2 French classes and an English class for grade 9s and 10s. So however you want to lay the table for this, we'll start with like the basics, and then we can go, more in detail afterwards.
Yeah. So, I'm excited. I love talking about this stuff. So, I mean, one of the things I think, as far as some basics for you and also for listeners out there, is one of the biggest things that we often talk about at schools all over is this idea of just opening up your learning with a question. So even if you feel completely like, I don't know how to like, quote unquote, do inquiry in my classroom, or how do I make my lessons more inquiry driven? One thing is like, start with a question. So in a lot of schools, I know for years, it's, for many teachers, especially in the US, it would be, kind of a requirement to have like your teaching point or your objective, very clear and somewhere. But while of course you're going to have that end goal in mind, instead of telling the kids like, today we will do blah, blah, blah. Instead, like, can we reword that as a question? And usually that's something very easy to do, a little tweak, but it changes the whole dynamic of the classroom. Because instead of me coming up as a teacher and being like, so today I want to teach you that writers, work hard to craft powerful endings or something like that. Instead of that being my teaching point, like we're going to look at endings in our essays or something. Instead, can I transform that into a question and say like, so today a question I want us to all explore together is, how do writers craft powerful endings? Or you might ask them, why do writers craft powerful endings? And that little tweak changes it from where you're no longer the sage on the stage, so to speak, up there, being like, I'm the like holder of all knowledge, and today I'm going to teach you this. Instead, it's like, no, like, here's a question we're going to explore together. And of course, your expertise as a teacher is important, and the kids need you there. So you can be there to guide, and you definitely have things that you're going to lift up to help and to support them. But you're not the knower of all things. And the kids need to see that too, that like, there's still so much more you're learning. And I guarantee you that when you open up with questions, and that the kids will teach you things, because I learn from them all the time. Things they'll say, things like thoughts they'll raise where I'm like, what? I never thought of it that way. So whether you're going to be analyzing a text, or whether they're working on writing something or whatever, or in a math classroom, in a science classroom, in any classroom, instead of saying like, here's like the teaching point that I'm teaching you, instead, like, how could you change that into a question? And just opening with a question instead, that you're going to explore together, can make a huge shift in the classroom culture, and transforming it into more of an inquiry environment, where that's kind of how we think. We ask questions and we dig into it together and we explore. So that would be one thing that I think in any context, any teacher could do, that can make a big difference.
It sounds so simple. It just sounds like, like, why haven't I been doing this all along? Yeah,
I know. And it's so I know it's this quick, like, little tweak, but it makes such a big difference. And then to really be open, as you get more and more comfortable, then being open to really listening, how your students answer that question too. So depending on what you're teaching, you might open with a question, and before you start exploring, you might have them like turn and talk together and share some of their initial thoughts about that question. before they inquire more. And that can be great formative data for you as a teacher to listen in or to have some of them share out and to realize, oh, wow, like in either direction, it can be surprising. So sometimes it's like, wow, I was expecting them to have way more background knowledge on this and they don't. So I need to be responsive to that. And that's going to, shift how we dig into this today. Other times it's the opposite. You recognize that most of them have a ton of background knowledge on this for you to tap into that you would have never known if you just come in, and done the lesson you planned that you've done the past 3 years, or what have you. Instead, let's really be open and flexible and responsive because we never have the same kids in our room year after year. So we shouldn't be doing the exact same lesson year after year either.
Right.
Certainly we'll pull on certain resources that we know are really strong, of course, but that we're always open to new learning and to new ideas and new perspectives. And I think it's helpful for the kids to start with a question, but I think it's helpful for us as teachers too, with that release of control or perceived control, because let's be real, none of us are ever in control. We kid ourselves when we think we are, but so it can help you release that perceived notion of control and help put yourself in the perspective of being an inquirer again too. That like I'm like genuinely curious about this, I'm not, and you might start off kind of feeling like you're pretending a little bit, like, oh, I'm just going to change my teaching point to a question. But pretty soon, you're not pretending, and like you genuinely are excited to see where this is going to go. So I think that's a good starting place.
Yeah. So, okay. I've done this like sometimes, starting with a question and throughout, I think some of these like inquiry-based sessions, again, done to the best of my abilities, because I like what you said, just to like touch back on that idea of not being the sage on the stage. I can't even fake it sometimes. Like I taught a history class last year. It was my first year teaching grade 10 academic history. And like, I would say, and honestly, I'm kind of in a reflection state right now, but like it was a very inquiry based like course because I couldn't fake like knowing the whole curriculum and knowing every detail of every world war and every prime minister and every this and every type of gun that was used and ammunition. And so I think I embraced that whole idea of like inquiry-based learning with open arms because it put me like at peace with for like taking that that pressure off myself of having to know it all and like having the students see through me that I wasn't, necessarily like an expert, quote unquote. So putting that back on the students was something that I did often. Like they taught the class, and that was huge for us because the students took so much more ownership of that lesson. Like they knew that they were responsible for, this event in history in this day and age. So that was like definitely a winning, I would say like a small win in my history class last year. And one thing I want to ask you, because again, I have you here, and an obstacle that I found a challenge was just like in inquiry based, you need to have students who are critical thinkers. And that is a skill that like takes time.
Yes.
And it doesn't mean, because what I was finding, right? So I put a question on the board. Obviously, it's a question that is not Googleable, or else I would have just Googled it myself and I would have had the answer. So my students, like their first instinct is just to like Google the exact question the exact same way that I put it on the board. And like they expect to find the answer. And there's like, it's taking that time to push past like that Google search, or just like Google searching something and just looking at the first two responses, or like, thinking about having to maybe reformulate, is that an English word? Reformulate. Yeah. Like the question or whatever you're looking for. So yeah, how do you one, do you see this happen where you are? And two, like, how do you overcome it?
Yeah. So, at most schools that I'm seeing now in my current capacity, a lot of them just because of the nature of many international schools. They're either IB schools, so International Baccalaureate, or they're just inquiry based, even if they're using their own, system or what have you. So, in that sense, it's not as big of an issue or a challenge because most of the kids have from the time they were very young have just, this is how class has been. They've always been in an inquiry-based environment. So to them, it's like the norm to have to be critical thinkers. But what's interesting is you will have sometimes students move in from other schools. Maybe their family was just transferred. And so they've been going to public schools in their home country since they were young. And this is their first time in an international school. And at first, it can be very jarring for them. But it's interesting because they're surrounded by so many classmates who this is the norm for those classmates, then it doesn't take them that long to realize like, oh, this is like what we do here. And they kind of they start to slide in. Like the first week, they're sort of deer in the headlights, and then they start to realize that this is a thing. So, but I think in remembering, thinking way back, I've been overseas for so long now, but thinking back to when I started my career in the US, and I felt like every year, because I wasn't in a place where everyone in the school was inquiry-based and where this was like a thing. I was dealing with the situation of kids coming and feeling like every year I had to start off fresh. Like they'd come to me just expecting to be spoon-fed, for lack of a better phrase. Like
it's true.
And many of them were very high, quote unquote, high performing students. Like, they're used to getting straight A's and whatever, but they'd be like, tell me what to do and I'll do it. Like, just tell me what to do and I'll do it, and I'll do it well. But like, I want you to just tell me. And so I would definitely have to spend, and I think it's so worth the time. In fact, I don't just think, like, I know it's so worth the time to lay that foundation first. So often we'll say you've got to go slow to go fast. Like, go slow first, because then the rest of your year, once you have that established, will be going fast in beautiful ways. Like, then it will all be flying. But like, just kind of setting that tone and creating that culture in your classroom where it's a culture of curiosity, and where we are. I think you hit the nail on the head when you said critical thinking. Like, that's what it's about. And honestly, if we bring it back to our North Star, the kids, like, it's so important that they go out into the world with the ability to think critically. I mean, I think we've all had, I know we mentioned Facebook earlier, but we've all had, not to sound demeaning, but we've all seen posts that adults have shared where we're like, I can't believe you shared that. Like, that's so obviously fake, or that's so obviously not a reliable source, or how are you believing this? And that's because they themselves as adults were never given the opportunity to really be taught critical thinking, and you don't know what you don't know. So it's so important that we're empowering kids with that skill set. So to keep that in mind, that it's not even just about, I like believe in inquiry-based education and I want to be an inquiry-based teacher. Instead, it's really about, like, this is my duty as a teacher, is to not have them leave me thinking that, like, they can just sit passively and that, like, it's just going to happen to them. Instead, they have to be actively thinking and questioning and learning. And so I think it is slow at first, and it's kind of just day after day, setting up where you're asking questions, where they're having to take the lead. I think that wait time is really important. And I know we often hear about that when we're first starting.
Yes.
I mean, I remember being in university and being told, like, it's important as a teacher to offer wait time. Like, we hear it, but I mean, like, really, like, being comfortable in that uncomfortable moment of wait time where you're just like putting a question out there and then waiting it out. And so certainly I think always have them in those situations, like, allow them to turn and talk, or to, depending on the situation, reflect about it for a moment in their journal before sharing out. I think that helps a lot. Like, we have to remember not to just go in cold, like ask a question and then just expect them to pop up. Like, they haven't had a chance to even, like, warm up their thinking yet. So, or to test out their thinking. Like, a lot of it too is, kids are people too. And it can be very hard as a human to not feel self-conscious of like, am I going to say, because again, it's all unknown. If they're not used to this inquiry nature, it's this feeling of, am I going to be wrong? They're still very much in that mindset of right or wrong instead of an open-minded environment where it's like, there's not right or wrong. Like we're just sharing out, it could be this or perhaps this. It's like we need to create this I wonder lens and that there are different possibilities. But that takes time. And so a lot of it at first, if they're not embracing it at first, a lot of it is just that they're a little scared and a little self-conscious of like, am I going to sound stupid? Am I going to sound wrong? So letting them talk it out first. And then when you do ask a question, like even if at first no one's saying anything, like you've let them talk about it. And now you're like, so I'd love to hear some of your ideas. Let's share out. And like crickets, just waiting and like really just stand there and wait. And, someone like one of them's going to say something. It's just that sometimes we want it to happen in 4 seconds and, wait like a good 30 seconds and they're going to say something. And then what's so incredible, and I've seen this like by now, I've seen it hundreds of times. Once one says something, then they all start jumping in. It's like, now it's comfortable and now it's okay. Look, this person said something and like, no one like thought it was dumb. So like, great, let's all start sharing. Oh, I have an idea too. And I agree with that. Or I kind of want to add on this. And that can be helpful too for some of them as kind of a scaffold, depending on your situation, like providing some basic like sentence stems, also depending on the age too, but of like things that how they could start off some of their responses, like, that's, I agree because, or that's an interesting point. I want to add on. And then, what would they add on? So just some of those things that they feel like more comfortable engaging in an actual collaborative conversation. So yeah, I think just starting it off slow and, building that foundation, and just knowing that at first it's going to be different for a lot of those students if they're not used to it. So going into it, knowing that, I think sometimes we get so excited and we're like, it's going to be amazing. I'm going to do this lesson. It's all going to flow like perfectly. And there is no perfect, so just being responsive to the kids, but not giving up on it. Like knowing that what they need to see is that they come back day after day and you're still, asking questions and you're still expecting them to like have a role in this and to like harness their agency and for them to own their learning, and that's an expectation that's not going away. I think after a few days they see like, oh, like this is the thing here. This is how it rolls in this class, so that they have to get on board.
Wow. Okay. So many things. I'm not sure where to start, and we are at 51 minutes. So I'm going to do two things. First, you have thrown me into like this existential crisis about lesson planning, because if we are doing inquiry-based learning, we can't expect, like you said, that lesson to pan out exactly like we, took the time to plan the night before or whatever it may be. So I think that it's important to be flexible in that. Obviously, there's like a goal for the lesson, and you have an idea of where you're going, but you haven't decided like what road you're going to take, and you have to be cool with like doing U-turns and hitting a roadblock and, going down another path for another question that the students might have, or right. Because I'm sure, and I've seen like, a little bit starting with a question that leads to another, to another, to another. And it gets to a student who's like, hey, this, and then the students like start asking questions, right? And they start thinking about it. And then they start, like you said, taking ownership of that subject, and realize that they are actually genuinely curious about it. We're not like forcing them to be curious about it. Right. And that's amazing when that happens.
Yes. And that authenticity piece is so important. Yeah. And I was just thinking as you were saying that, something else too, that sometimes I kind of take for granted because it's just kind of in my bones. I've always been a workshop teacher, so using the workshop model. And it's just it is inquiry. So I think for some teachers who are thinking, how do I do this? Like you mentioned, lesson planning, like how do I still have a trajectory, because I know that there are things my kids need before the year is through, but also stay flexible and open. So I think using that workshop framework of having a mini lesson at the beginning of class, so maybe your whole group time is just like 8 to 12 minutes. So opening with a question, they might turn and talk about it for a bit. You explore some things. You might even model a bit for them based on what's been said and based on what the question is that you're exploring. Or you might, with language and literature, maybe you look at a mentor author, like you've put a question about how authors craft powerful endings. And so then you look at the ending from a read aloud text that you read recently and look back at it together and inquire into like, well, what did this author do? Like, what can we learn from them? So you take like 8 to 12 minutes all together as a whole group. But then after that, like the bulk of your time, then you send the kids off to actually like try it on their own and apply it and put it into action, whether that's sometimes completely independently, one-on-one, or whether it's with a partner, like a writing or reading partner, or, in any class, their math partner, or in a group, like sometimes they're working in book clubs, like however it is that they're going off and now actually trying some things. A bit based on what you talked about that day, but not just that day, that they're pulling on their whole repertoire of skills that perhaps the whole past 2 weeks you've been exploring something. And so they have this whole toolbox that they can pull back on and think, which skills will help me with the work that I'm doing today as a reader, writer, thinker. And then coming back together at the end for a few minutes of like share time where we come back together and either come back together as a whole class and kind of revisit the question we started with and see how our thinking has changed, or maybe we share with a partner some of the biggest work that we've done that day. But it's that whole idea of like mini lesson, work period, share time can be a great framework for inquiry, because it keeps the bulk of your time with kids doing the work, kids doing the thinking, but it also frames it with some whole group, community time to grapple with a question and a reflective celebratory piece at the end. So wanted to mention that for those who might not be familiar with the workshop model, that could be something to look into.
And just the last thing I want to add before you wrap this up, because I feel like we could go on for hours on end, and you probably talk about this for hours on end. I'm very bad about that.
Like I will talk your ear off, and you'll be like, "Oh, whoa, no," because we love it, right? And I know you're the same. Exactly. Like that's why you do this podcast is like we love talking about this stuff. So, yeah,
100%. But it's just interesting because I feel as though sometimes in the inquiry-based approach, students will say, well, Madame Lalonde isn't teaching me anything, like, because it's them that needs to figure things out, right? So no, I'm not explicitly putting up a slides, or I'm not explicitly putting notes on the board for you to like memorize and shoot back on a test later. No, I'm not teaching you that way, but I'm teaching you a plethora of other, skills and competencies and ways of thinking that you will use, throughout your life, but also in a framework of, whatever class we're in, whether it's history or geography and this and that. But the students, if they're not in a school culture where like inquiry-based learning is at the heart of the pedagogy, like it's hard for them to make that transition, because they've honestly just been brought up in a school system where that's what it's been. It's been the notes and the tests and the this and the that. So I don't blame them for having that resentment. And, it's a lot more work an inquiry-based learning approach than memorizing, right? So
you have to really think.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, did you want to add on that before you tell our listeners how to connect with you, Twitter, website, all that fun stuff?
Yeah. So I'll just say, thinking about that challenge is, that in inquiry-based teaching and learning, explicit teaching, of course, does have a place. It's just that it's what we'll often say is it's just in time, not just in case. So the difference is we're not front loading everything or having the whole class be this 50-minute lecture of me just in case, because they need to know this, like just in case I'm going to tell them everything. Instead, it's like, I'm going to ask them questions and see what they already know and see where their thinking takes them. And then I'm going to be there as the professional educator with my expertise that when it's just in time, when they do need some explicit teaching in something, like I'm there to give it. So again, thinking about the workshop model, what's also great about that is because your whole group session is a mini lesson, then during that work period, you as the teacher are constantly working one-on-one and in small groups, so you can really differentiate. And so you might notice a pattern of, maybe there are 3 kids who could really use some support. And if we go back to thinking of a writing example, if they are writing essays, maybe they really need some support in using transitions to help their writing flow. So while the other kids are working on their own drafts, you pull the small group of 3 kids and you coach into this idea of using transitions. And again, you open with a question of how do they use transitions? And maybe you look at either something you've written or that another author has written and together explore, what did this author do? And can I find a place in my own writing where I could try that same kind of thing? And so you're there to coach as they revise their piece and work on transitions. And other times you're working one-on-one and having a conference with a kid and talking to them about their writing or reading or their lab report, if it's science, whatever they're working on. I'm having conversations with kids that when we set up the framework where the bulk of the time is kids doing the work, that also gives us the opportunity as a teacher to coach into that work, whether it's with a small group or one-on-one. So just this idea that I think sometimes, it can be the misconception that inquiry is just like chaos, like just go and figure it out. But no, like definitely figuring it out is a big part of it. Like we want kids to be figuring out kind of people. Like that's absolutely what we want at the end of the day, so that when they are thrown into an unfamiliar situation, they can use critical and creative thinking skills and figure things out. But that there's also a time and place in inquiry teaching for explicit instruction. It's just that we're doing it with very thoughtfully, that it's just in time for those kids, not just in case. So that might be helpful for teachers out there to think about, like how am I structuring? And so that kids feel that too, that when you are asking them a question and asking them to think, that they notice that you are providing tools and you are providing like coaching and support that are leading them to new ideas. Something else too that we'll often do is have like a checklist or something that kids can use for self-assessment, because the ability to self-assess is really important as well. And oftentimes once they're pushed to self-assess, then they realize, oh, I actually have learned a lot. Like you are teaching me things, I said you weren't, but wow. So again, that reflection piece, like taking time to reflect regularly so that they can see their learning, that it is happening.
Right.
So I'll add that. And then, as far as where people can reach me, I have a website. It's my name, so TonyaGilchrist.com. They can definitely go there. I have a lot of blog posts, and also I have links and posts to all of the podcasts I've been on if they want to check out some other podcasts and have a listen. There's also a contact me link on there, so they can feel free to reach out. As you can tell from this conversation, I love talking about this stuff. So I always love getting emails and messages from people with different things that are on their mind. As we mentioned earlier, I'm really active on Twitter, and my Twitter handle is at Mrs._Gilchrist. So at MRS_GILCHRIST. And then finally, they could also go to aaronkentconsulting.com. That is the team that I'm a part of, so they can take a look at the different schools we've been at and where we're going next. They could also reach out. There's a contact information on there as well. So both on my own website and on that website are great places to reach out.
I will be sure to put all of that info, all the links in the show notes of this episode. Tonya, I can't I can't express how much it has been a pleasure to have spoken with you. Like, this whole episode just flew by. I think that listeners are going to get so much value out of this. And I just want to thank you, like, from the bottom of my heart, for taking the time to speak with me today, because like you said, as educators, our time and our energy are our most valuable resources. So I want to just end by saying that in this big, beautiful world of education, we give what we can, we do what we can, and for the rest, que sera, sera. Que Sera Sera is a proud member of the Voice Ed Radio Network. Original music, editing, and production of this podcast is done by the talented Matzer Leroux. Find my podcast on all podcast platforms, including SoundCloud, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and now newly on YouTube. Talk to you soon.